Have MMOs become less social over the years? Have the unbreakable bonds of camaraderie forged in failure been replaced with systems to support solo players? Has the MMO genre gone from a connected, chatty community to an antisocial mass? And if so, how did this change happen? Let's discuss. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Hayes, and this is MMOPinion, a bite-sized show where I dive into the issues plaguing the MMO landscape today and then give my opinion on them. Drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more MMO discussion. Ring the bell so you don't miss a single future video. And as usual, a big thank you to my supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep this channel alive and allow me to make videos. More on this at the end. Today I'd like to address what seems to be a very commonly held belief: the idea that the MMORPG genre has become less social. This view that players talk less, don't communicate as much as they used to back in the early days of the genre. The idea that connection with other players has been replaced with group finders and efficient gameplay. And I feel that while there is some truth to this, it's not as simple as people like to claim. Now, I like to keep these videos as short as possible, but I also feel the need to cover all the important points in enough detail, and this is a complex topic, so I'd like to look at 4 main areas to cover the MMOs are less social argument, and they are: 1. The novelty and then death of online societies. 2. The genre popularity boom and the rise of the solo player. 3. The catering of systems to the solo player. And finally 4. The shifting of social interactions to third-party platforms. As always, let's begin at the start. Number 1. The novelty and death of the online society. When I talk to older MMO players, especially those who have played during the times of Everquest, Ultima Online or Asheron's Call, I often hear stories of how they'd stand for hours and just talk to people, how they would enjoy having a hearty debate in-game somewhere, or how they had friends they'd go out of their way to see. And it was amazing because these friends lived on the other side of the planet, and yet in-game they were right next to each other. And that led me to look into the online social side. So let's just look at the dates. Bebo released in 2005, Facebook in 2004, MySpace in 2003, and even MSN Messenger came out in 1999. And many people would run home from school to sit on their computer and talk to their friends because this, at the time, was novel. Online social media has been with us for around 20 years in a mainstream capacity, but before that, online communication was much more limited. You had internet relay chat rooms, or IRCs, and forums or message boards you had to keep refreshing to check for new posts. They weren't updated live. So when Habitat released in 1987, The Realm Online in 1996, or Ultima Online in 1997, the online social space was given something it wasn't used to: a visual interface that allowed real-time chat. Players could log in and meet others in a virtual world, and this aspect alone was novel enough to be extremely attractive to gamers at the time. If you said to someone in 1997, hey, you can join an online virtual world and talk to tens of thousands of people from all over the planet in real time and even go on adventures with them, that would be an incredible advert for the game. And in some cases, the game itself, the plot or the adventure, was actually secondary to the social facilitation it allowed. Everquest is often referred to as the world's prettiest chat room. And it was because the social interaction was such a huge draw for the games that they built content into the games designed to enhance it and rely on it. If many players talking and communicating was a major draw for your game, then you built in puzzles and challenges and bosses and dungeons that relied on this aspect and encouraged players to do it more. Older players like to remember how long they had to search for a group, or how they'd spend ages trying to do a group quest that was impossible solo, or how you used to become known on your server, and your online reputation wasn't measured by faction reputation or numbers, but by players' actual opinions of you. The older MMOs had the benefit of online socialization being a new, novel and fascinating game mechanic by itself, and the development leaned heavily into this. If you started on your own, you wouldn't survive long. You'd have to find a guild, talk to people, prove your place and form bonds. The idea of having other human beings being essential parts of your story was at the time such a novel gameplay mechanic. But as we know, novelty fades, and something something that was groundbreaking at the time quickly becomes the standard. Newer games released, Dark Age of Camelot, RuneScape, World of Warcraft, Anarchy Online. And suddenly the simple pull of you can be social and talk to people in real time wasn't enough. Every online game had that now. They had to do something different to stand out. And if MMOs for so long had been relying on the you must play together, then now the opposite direction was the novel concept. In 2004, two things happened on the internet that would come to shape the world we know today. One was the launch of World of Warcraft, the other was the launch of Facebook. Neither would start as the industry titans they would go on to become, but this was the beginning of the gameplay shift away from social-focused content and toward the individual player. The MMO as a genre was about to rise sharply in popularity, and this rise would bring with it the problem of the solo player. With the MMO genre gaining popularity, and the gamers currently enjoying it, loving the social aspect of it, developers now faced an issue. As the genre grew and advertising expanded, they knew there would be a large subset of players who wanted to play the game but didn't want to have to team up. This is simple player preference. Sometimes it can be nice to be involved in a game or a subculture without feeling the need to constantly communicate or be involved in the active day-to-day society. I know a lot of older players say to me, if you don't want to be social then don't play an MMO, and I disagree. Anyone can play an MMO. The allure of the genre is you can have an adventure in another world and be another person. If you choose to play someone who wants to be alone, so be it. It can be fun to be in a living world even if you don't take part in it. That's your choice. With the increase in popularity and thus players, MMO designers knew they would have many people who wanted to play alone, and they couldn't simply ignore them, because ignoring them would mean less profits and no company wants that. So now the dilemma happens. The MMO genre had been leaning into the social aspect since its early days because in those early days it was the genre's greatest strength. But now, attracting the next generation doesn't just mean being social, it means providing content that doesn't need social interaction. Because if you didn't make your game solo friendly and your competitors did, all the solo players would go to their game instead, and in the MMO industry your game lives or dies on its popularity. As much as the social players wanted to keep the game about being social and requiring the social aspect to succeed, the developers had to find a balance. Players of MMOs at the time valued the society and community aspect, and it was this idea of a world connected through players and not through in-game systems that appealed to them. But game designers and shareholders were looking at the rapidly emerging solo market and the growth of gaming in general and the popularity of offline games and thinking, how can we appeal to that demographic as well? Because if we don't, another MMO will. This would be the design philosophy shift that would ultimately end up diverting MMOs away from what they started as, online social hubs with a game attached, and toward what we know them as today, online adventure games with the ability to be social. While both versions of design provide the same basic elements, the early heavily focused on player interaction because it was the novel's strength, and now design is focused more on gameplay, and socializing is a distant second. With this boom, game developers not only added in content that catered to solo players, changing the games to more closely resemble the single-player RPGs of the time, they also added in several in-game systems that allowed solo players to compete in and complete the same content as social players without needing to do any actual socializing. The most well-known example of this is probably the Group Finder. You see, before, clearing hard, high-level content in old MMOs pre-Group Finder wasn't just about getting to the content, it was about finding the group first. This demanded socialization. You needed to have a guild, or a group, or be willing to gather people. The act of forming a group was gameplay in itself. Who would work with who? And because it was still a novel experience, it was well received by many gamers. Now, the game designers needed to make the game available to the widest audience, and this means removing any barriers to entry without compromising the atmosphere and integrity of the game. And Group Finder was the closest solution. Now, everyone could form a group without needing to socialize. This advancement removed the forming a group social aspect of the experience, which pushed the MMO design further from socialization and more toward gameplay. Another attraction of the solo playstyle was the ability to remove the reliance on other players to progress. If you as a player only have 30 minutes to an hour to play and the game is based around social progression or social achievement, then if you fail to form a group or find others willing to help you within your short play session, you don't actually get to do anything. If your 30 minutes playing is spent entirely in the main city shouting for a group to go and do the content you want to do, even if that is creating your own fun, or you get invited to a larger group to do more complex stuff but you know you won't be able to finish it due to your own time and won't get the end reward, eventually you become demotivated to log on at all. The designers needed to make an experience where newer players, or older players with less time as life goes on, would still be able to log into the game and do something. Back in the early days when games were glorified chat rooms, this wasn't necessarily an issue because you could do whatever you want in those 30 minutes, but with gameplay taking more of a focus, the ability to actually experience some gameplay every play session, no matter how short, dictated the need to remove relying on other people as heavily. This attempt of the genre to cater to the solo player and to grab the new market demographic instead of relying solely on players who wanted a social game actually created a rather powerful feedback loop. Games design shifted to allow solo players to compete with social players, which in turn means the game can now attract more solo players. But these solo players don't socialize, meaning even more systems now needed to be added to support them being able to access all the content. The MMO became so focused on allowing everyone to play it and removing all barriers to entry, it removed a core component of what made it attractive in the first place. In order to attract more players, they removed the need to communicate, despite the fact the early players were attracted by the need to communicate. With groups now being so easy to form and personal reputation on a server being all but forgotten, players could now look at other players not simply as important people, but as replaceable group members. Where before it would take 20 to 30 minutes to find a full group, so you were willing to fail a few times and work with what you had, you can now instantly remove someone from a group and know they will be replaced rather quickly. The advantages and benefits of being social or well-known were now replaced with the in-game automated systems. When a community has no reason to communicate, no tangible advantage to talking that isn't provided by something in the game anyway, combined with how the MMO design philosophy has been moving toward enabling solo play for years, you end up with a lot of players not talking. A society bigger than any seen in any MMO before not being social, because there's really no need to be. But, and this is a really important fact that a lot of people don't seem to realise, just because social interaction within the games themselves has reduced does not mean that interaction or socialization within the genre has reduced. I actually think the opposite. I think it's increased, we just don't immediately see it. Remember how back in the early days, online communication was limited to message boards and forums, and then the MMO came along to show a bright and shiny new alternative? Well, the online communication market shifted then, and it's shifted again now, away from MMOs and towards social media, video sharing sites, and third-party chat programs like Skype, Discord, or WhatsApp. Communication in MMOs between people used to happen within the game itself because they were, at the time, one of the best places to communicate, one of the only places. And over the years, many MMOs have actually added new features that make communication within them easier than ever. Private messages, guild chat, friend chat, clan chat, cross-server grouping, voice chat, party chat, in-game mail. There are more ways than ever to actually communicate and be social within MMO games, so it's not like you can't do it. So why aren't people using them as much? And well, it's simply because the MMO now focuses on the gameplay and the social side is being picked up elsewhere, like here. You're watching a YouTube video right now about MMOs. If you're watching during the premiere, you're likely watching with hundreds of other people, probably all talking together. Then there are Discord servers around the world for clans and guilds. Facebook groups dedicated to games, or strange ways of playing the games, Twitch streams and communities built around them, or YouTube playthrough series that we all collectively come together to enjoy. The question of have MMOs become less social is a complex one, because while yes, the social aspects of the genre used to be focused on and are now afterthoughts, meaning communication within the games themselves is very sparse, the social aspects that have been built up around the genre is bigger than ever. YouTubers, Twitch streamers, films, books, conventions, Twitter, the MMO is still a popular genre. The social aspect has simply moved out of the game and onto the platforms specifically designed for socializing. So if you say that the MMO is no longer social, I would in some ways agree. The MMO game itself is not focused on socialization anymore. But I would also disagree because the MMO game is now focused on gameplay and the social aspect is being picked up by other programs. If you want to recapture the social aspect of an MMO or get back to those good old days of actually talking to people, you might need to look toward the MMO for the gameplay part and then outside of the game for the connection part. For example, if you'd like to join our Discord and talk about MMOs or come and play with us sometime, we have a Discord open to all. The link's in the video and we'd be happy to chat with you. I truly think that modern MMOs aren't placing socialization front and center like they used to, but there are still many MMO gamers being social. So how do you feel about this? Do you think the genre's design shift from social interaction toward gameplay to accommodate new players, with third-party programs picking up the social slack, is a good thing? Or should MMOs have remained hubs of socializing and force solo players to integrate into clans, groups or guild to make sure the society stays front and center? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for joining me in this episode of MMOPinion. If you've liked the video, then drop a like or sub to the channel for more MMO stuff. Ring that bell so you don't miss a future video. And a massive thank you to all my Patreon supporters and Twitch subs who keep the channel alive. You can support the Patreon from only £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter and our Discord. And as always, have a great day.